we as a society have been culturally conditioned to see these things that we eat as food, and the reality is they are not food, they're garbage, right? They're essentially toxic garbage, lacking in true nutritional value, oftentimes poisonous and problematic for our body. And the reason that we think that they are food is because we now have generations of people telling us they're food. In other words, we have had multiple generations to where butter was added to everything, then margarine. But then because we found out margarine was even worse than butter when the margarine got outlawed, we went back to putting butter in our food because that's what grandma used to do or great grandma used to do. And then we still think that it's okay when it caused problems. The same thing with all these refined sugars, right? Refined sugar was always a problem. We go back and when they started milling, sugar cane over here, hundreds of years ago, right? There were studies that looked back and found that even this was looked at a long time ago. The plantation owners had shorter lifespans than the people working in the fields. Okay? And you would think it would be the opposite because they were eating all the milled sugar and were sedentary. They were dying younger than their slaves were. My God. When you think about that, you're like, these people who had these horrific conditions and horrible lives were still outliving them purely because they weren't eating the junk. They weren't eating the same junk. My God. That should tell you everything that you need to know about just normal table sugar. But look how we've gotten to a point. We're at a point where as a society, so let's look at that. Table sugar wasn't a thing hundreds of years ago. It's a very much a more modern invention, not saying through our chemical technology, but it's really only something we started using, a couple hundred years ago. All right? It became the norm. It reduced lifespan. It caused problems. It caused problems. We know that it did. It's documented. Then we have high fructose corn syrup came out because it turned out to be slightly cheaper to make, slightly sweeter. Government subsidized corn, made it cheaper to produce. Now we have that. And then the issue we have there, this is how ridiculous tradition goes. As soon as we get some data showing it's a hair worse, and it practically it isn't, by the way. From a pragmatic perspective, it's not, but on paper it is worse than table sugar. Again, by such a small margin, and then you factor in how much you're consuming versus the sweetness, it may not actually be any worse. They're both equally bad, really, but slightly worse. But then we have people saying, oh, I'm going to avoid that. But then how many people eat it? Because it's their normal. Because we have generations of people going and drinking regular soda or whatever you call it, depending on where you live. Right? Chock full of high fructose corn syrup. Everything's sweetened with it. It's in everything. It's our normal. People are like, it's just part of food. It just helps make food sweet. It's a poison, really. Again, refined fructose is poisonous to your liver. It causes all sorts of problems when consumed in any degree of excess. Right? And I've done detailed videos on why. On fructose metabolism, why it's different than when you get it in fruit. I've gone through extreme detail of that. So you take that fact, but people just consume it. It's their norm. It's their norm, so they just accept that this garbage is acceptable to put into their body every day. All right. Where it gets ridiculous, some people have realized that, and then you have a big section of the population go, yeah, I know that's just bad. I avoid it, so I eat real sugar. Okay? Think about that. They fall back to still a multi-generational tradition And they go, well, so instead of eating this slightly worse poison that we know is bad, I'm going to go back to eating the crap that killed my grandparents, or my great-grandparents, or my great-great-great-grandparents. Let's just eat the crap that killed them that's only 95% as bad. We still fall back into that paradigm of, well, good enough for my grandpappy who had diabetes, good enough for me. And then we eat this garbage and we think of it as food. Now, these are ones that are made out of food, right? And that's the where it's a problem, because people say, well, it's just, milled, it's burned and then milled sugar cane. Okay, it's a plant. They do the same thing with butter. It's the cream skimmed off the top that loses all the nutrients, all the protein, all the magnesium, all the calcium. And we just churn it a little, which emulsifies it and processes it, changes the molecular structure of the fat. Okay, but it's just because it's made from milk, it's still okay. At least I'm not eating all this really bad chemical garbage, but you're still eating an extremely heavily refined garbage in both cases. They just happen to have been made from real foods, because milk is a real food. I mean, sugar cane's a plant. Milk is a whole food, right? With quite a few health benefits. So since it's made from it, it's okay. But it's really not. It's a tradition that's told you that it is, because it's what killed your great-grandparents. So you're just going to eat that instead of the junk that's killing everyone today. Like, this is a problem. But do you guys see how this problem continues? So even when people realize the new generation is oblivious to the garbage they're eating, that's even worse, this become a tradition that we classify as food, we'll go back to eating the other stuff. But at the end of the day, it still comes down to we shouldn't be eating all this garbage. We shouldn't be eating refined fats. We shouldn't be eating refined sugar. These aren't food. We definitely shouldn't be consuming alcohol. Literally a poison that kills the crap out of us. It's deadly. It's an addictive poison. It's why you get drunk from it. It literally is poisoning your brain. That is biologically what's happening. Okay? But culturally, we've been told for generations that these things are fit for human consumption, that they're food. They've become a cultural, social programming. Okay? And we have to undo this programming. We have to step back and say, no, this is not food. And we have to quit teaching children that it's food, because that is where the problem starts. When children are taught that these things are food, the next generation is screwed every time. And that is what has happened. We have to break the cycle. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys and gals next time.